Welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we tackle a single relevant question based on our Bible reading for that day. This week, our reading is centered around the book of Titus, and today I'm joined by Zack Unkenholz and Chris Rexroad, and we're going to look at a question from our reading in Titus 3, 1 through 8. He says, "Remind believers to submit to the government and its officers. They should be obedient, always ready to do what is good. They must not slander anyone and must avoid quarreling. Instead, they should be gentle and show true humility to everyone." He says, the very first sentence of verse 1 says, "Remind believers to submit to the government and its officers." What does submission to the government and its officers look like?
Obeying to the level that is expected for that. But I would go a little bit further and say to the level that's expected for that without sinning against God.
Yeah, I would say, the things I think of are like, render unto Caesar's what is Caesar's, like pay your taxes, do your duty as a citizen, be respectful of officers, government officials, like, the people that like in your community, the people that have been put in positions of power to, have respect for them, do as expected of you. And two, I think as well as we talk about this, like, as we submit to the government, to even go beyond what would be expected of a normal person, because as believers, I think we are expected to go the extra mile. So pray for our leaders and pray for our officials, and maybe bring them donuts at some point. I think there's things that we can do as Christians that go beyond what's naturally expected of us, that can show the love of Christ to them. The Bible does not mention donuts, though. Bringing donuts. That was I just got a little creative there.
We were aware of that.
Okay.
Most of us are theologically sound enough to know that the Bible doesn't talk about
unleavened donuts.
Unleavened donuts. That was it. Yes.
What happened if you took a box of donuts down to the police station?
I've done that.
They would eat them.
They would eat them. Yeah.
Would they? They wouldn't take it as like you're making fun of them. You would just be giving it to them.
Maybe if you like laughed at them while they're eating them, I think that might be going too far. But I've done that a lot of times, like, or the fire department and things like that.
Are you required to do whatever the government imposes upon you to do?
Well, going off what Chris, so if you want to get to this too, but going off what Chris was saying, to the extent that it's not sinful, right? If the government is requiring you to do something that is ungodly, then I would say
Can you give me an example?
All right. Have you heard of The Purge? The Purge is a movie about, for 24 hours, everything's legal. You can do whatever you want, and the government allows it, right? Just because the government allows you, though, to like kill people or rob banks or whatever you want to do, does that make it right? Just because the government says it's okay?
They're not imposing that on you. They're allowing it.
Well, in the grander scheme of the movie, there is a purpose for it, and that they're trying to like kill. They're trying to get people to like kill people and things like that. It's very shady. So, but if the government, like, let's say this in real life, the government was. I'll give a COVID example.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a question now, since you brought this in.
Okay.
If it wasn't against the law for 24 hours.
Yeah.
Is there anybody you would kill?
No.
Why are you looking at Chris?
That's why I just started looking over there. Look, and there's somebody else over there.
No reason. Nobody. No, I can't think of a single person.
Would you be a male prostitute for 24 hours? That's a reference back to a few weeks ago.
Well, it's like Tyler's question. If you could do any crime, what would you do? And I can't remember if I said it or someone else said that it would kill an endangered animal, because it doesn't impact another person. And it'd be kind of cool to like kill a manatee. That sounds awful. We can't put this.
I'm in the reason the species is not here.
Golly.
That just sounds terrible.
All right. So if you could, see, you brought this in the podcast. If you could commit any crime and not go to jail for it, what would it be?
I would love to drive as fast as I possibly could. I like speed. I know that's not a real, shady one, but I don't know.
Not real shady.
No.
Not like putting a manatee
wouldn't
in a
do that
headlock.
now?
Yeah.
No. As
You trying to get
fast,
him
as
to admit
fast as
something?
No,
On
I'm not
camera?
trying to get him to
as
admit
fast
something.
as I want. No, I mean, unless one time I got a chance to go out and drive on a racetrack. That was legal though. That was awesome. But no,
Okay.
I'm not
So
saying I don't drive
What was your
a little
COVID
bit
example?
fast.
This is the COVID example I was given when you were asked for the last question of if the government requires you to do something ungodly. There was a big debate when I remember, at least for some churches, that the government was requiring or was preventing churches from meeting. They said they did not want churches to meet. And I knew a lot of people were very, very upset about that, and protests that were happening and people getting very upset about that because it seemed ungodly to force the church to not open. And I've heard both sides, and we don't have to get into all of that, but that's an example I can think of where it kind of that kind of is one of those situations that not as just in a movie, but in real life, where the government was imposing something that people were not listening to the government about because they thought, well, this is, they felt like they were choosing between God and government.
I know the arguments, but I don't think that's a right or wrong issue. As a matter of fact, I would probably side on it because our church shut down for 3 months here, and they fought it in court. The courts decided that they couldn't impose that on churches, and we started meeting back again. That was a case where, in my opinion, the right thing to do was to respect what government wanted you to do and let the courts play it out and then decide, whether you needed to rebel or not rebel. And in that case, they made what I believe to be the right choice, that they didn't have the right to impose that. Another example, say, let's say you're a judge or a magistrate. And in order to keep your job, you have to perform civil ceremonies for, that's what they would call it, a civil ceremony for homosexual couples. Should you or shouldn't you?
I would say it's kind of choosing what God's word says or choosing your job, and it could put your family in a difficult position if you lose your job because you refuse to do that. And so I guess it comes down to what is more important to you. I would say I don't think you should.
I don't think that I could. I could understand if somebody did in that role, if that was part of their job to legally bind two people together, but I wouldn't use the words under God or anything like that within that. But I don't think I personally could.
So how far do you extrapolate that as a part of your job, that you're not going to facilitate ungodliness? So let's say you work for a beer distributor, or you work at a restaurant who that has a bar. Do you have any inhibitions about serving alcohol to people who abuse it?
Set up guidelines in there to protect people. I mean, you can refuse the service if they start to become intoxicated, acting belligerent, or anything like that. But just simply serving somebody alcohol, I don't think that would be a cause for concern as a Christian. You just have to be very careful.
Yeah. Well, with that example, when I used to work as a server, I sort of had a 2-drink limit per person, and then I would ask my manager if it was okay. And before even the meal, I would ask people, is there someone who's a designated driver? I would ask that just to make sure people were safe if they were all going to be drinking. And so, and just those are things I just did. Like, those were things I did, but I couldn't refuse as part of my job. Like, yeah, like I could, if someone was drinking a lot, I couldn't refuse them. My manager could come over if they were causing trouble in the store, something like that was going on. But yeah, that's if I did, I would have lost my job if I said you can't drink anymore.
So in the case of a judge that is required to because they would be required. There wouldn't be any choice. If they're going to be a judge of any kind, district court judge, magistrate judge, they would have to be able to perform that ceremony. And if they were asked, they would be required to do that. If what does government look like if we remove all believers from those forms of government because they object to doing those jobs? Would our nation be better off with people who will submit to the government's authority and perform their duty, but still be a light? Or would we be better off to remove the light from those situations and then go get a job somewhere else where they didn't have to do that?
Definitely the second one is the one that we need to stick with so that we can still be there to encourage and influence. But that is definitely putting you in a hard spot if you're that person.
It's a complicated situation. Yeah. I don't think everything is as black and white. So I know people who, for example, won't pledge allegiance to the flag. They have no problem pledging their house for a mortgage, but they won't pledge themselves to the country. And so I think that is a piece of the puzzle that we have to think about. I think things are a lot more nuanced. And we say, well, I wouldn't do X if I was required to do it. For example, if let's say you were a sheriff and in COVID, the church was shut down, and we communicated pretty regularly with our law enforcement locally because we didn't want. I mean, this is a community. We don't want to put them in a position where we were at odds with them. They're believers. They believe it's wrong, but let's say the court had ordered the churches have to be shut down, and they were required to enforce that, and they come and lock the churches. Does that make them wrong, or is their responsibility? Right. to carry out their duty? It's a lot more complicated than we realize. And, he talks about not slandering and avoiding quarreling. There's other passages says we should work to live at peace with all men, try to live peaceably with all men. And I think it's a lot more nuanced than we realize. Should the church take a stand against homosexual marriage? The answer to that is yes. How it affects your individual job, particularly if you work for the government, that's a whole different animal. There would be people who would say, well, you should go find something else to do. But in reality, it doesn't matter whether you're a law enforcement officer, a wildlife officer, an accountant for the state treasurer. If you're working for the government, you're supporting whatever it is they're enforcing, and you're facilitating that in some form or fashion. And I think if we remove all light because something doesn't necessarily fit what we believe to be right or wrong, we've removed our ability to have influence on those situations. And it's a lot more nuanced than I think we realize. Well, thank you for joining us today on this edition of One Single Story. We hope you'll be back with us next week as we begin a conversation around Philemon.